and welcome to the Neurodivergent Musician Podcast. I'm your host, John Hart, and I'll be joined by a very special guest, Mr. John Gomm. We'll be talking about neurodivergent musician life. I'll let him introduce himself in a sec, but each episode is broken up into a traffic light format where we'll share insights in the red section, improvised babble in the amber, and a recommendation or tip you might find handy in the green. So, how you doing, John?
I'm okay, I think. I never know for sure. But I think I'm all right. Don't know. We'll find out, mate.
Have you just come back from tour?
Yeah, well, no, I came back. It's been very hectic recently, and it kind of dismantled. Sometimes you finish a load of traveling and then you come back feeling really kind of energized. Occasionally. You know, I mean, you'll have been exhausted. You're never like not exhausted some of the time, but this time I went to NAMM, which is a big trade show in Los Angeles, and it's really intense. Yeah. But it was actually surprisingly fun. Well, I say surprisingly, I was expecting to have, but sometimes it's too intense to have fun. But it was really good. I was really well looked after, and I got COVID, and it was not very nice. I got it like when I got back, I was feeling really run down. And it's like, oh, what's wrong? It must just be, done like a 12-hour flight or something. So I assumed it was that, but I got more and more ill. And then I had to the next thing I had to go and do was Italy. And I was still kind of getting over it. So I had to drag myself through that. And I also injured my wrist. No. So I do martial arts, which is terrible idea for a musician. It's great in a lot of ways. It's really good for your brain, but it's What was it? During a move or something like that? Were you during I do a lot of different kinds of techniques in the martial arts that I do. It's quite mixed. And this thing we were doing a hold, like a restraining thing. So almost like a security thing that they would teach to the police or whatever. Right. Like restraint and immobilization.
Yeah.
So this was a wrist thing. And I just thought, I won't do this. I'll just sit it out. But then I thought, well, no, I can do it to somebody, but I don't really want to let them do it to me in case it goes wrong. So I did it to somebody, and then we kind of switch. This is what usually happens. You learn how to do something, and then you'll try it with a partner, and then you'll switch over so they can try it on you. And it got to the point where we were going to switch and they were going to try it on me. And I was going to say, oh, no, can you find a different partner for this? And I just felt too guilty and let them do it anyway. It was and he got it wrong.
Oh, no.
He got it wrong. Well, he got it right. That's the problem. So whenever, again, you're training, doing that kind of stuff, you're supposed to, the most important thing is you're careful with the other person and you look after your partner. And he was heavy on purpose. He was just didn't realize how gently you have to do it. So I dragged myself around Italy with a wrist injury, playing all these gigs in pain. And then the day after I got back, my cat died. Oh, so it's basically just, don't laugh. And I'm kidding. I'm sorry, John. Don't know you that well. I shouldn't scare you like that. No, it is a comedy of disasters. I am genuinely very, very sad about my cat. He was only really young, and we got him in the pandemic because I had a cat for 20 years and he died before the pandemic started. And then I was like, okay, I think we should get a cat. To get us through lockdown. Having a kitten was a really nice thing to do.
Pet therapy and everything as well.
Yeah. So it really helped us. And then he's totally fine, really healthy, energetic cat, or so you think. And then suddenly, he just seemed really poorly. We took him to the vet and there was nothing they could do. And I reckon maybe he had a heart condition or something. It's funny, they're strangely delicate little guys.
And the grief thing, I mean, in any angle of life, like the 5 stages of loss of things as well. I mean, whether that's on people's radars. I've been writing a song about that recently, the 5 stages of loss, because it happens in identity. It can happen in. It sounds cheery. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I was like, right, okay.
You should write 5 songs. There's 5 parts.
Right,
write 5 fucking songs.
Exactly. Yeah, bringing out a new EP. This is going to sell well. Yeah, I don't know. It's like a measurement, but some people like it, some people don't. And I was like, actually, this is quite a good process, especially with COVID, relatives passing or whatever it is. It's like, how do you summarize this? And I suppose
I can't really. So I don't. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, that's right.
I won't do that. Is it? Are you sure?
No, well, as 2 neurodivergents, I mean, isn't that just like cutting up? It's like just a normal standard and the improvised.
Yeah, it's like my mind's gone somewhere else now. But yeah, I don't really process. I don't really react to things, and I never have emotionally. So
does it depend though on the thing?
I do react. I just don't. There's not an immediate. So, I might get really upset because something's happened, but I don't actually connect the fact that I'm upset or angry or sad or worried with the thing that's happened. So I might feel really sad after my cat's died, or angry, or all these other emotions which are normal, but I cannot connect it to that. Like, even though I know it obviously must be that, I don't have like a thought triggering a feeling. Which is why for people who have neurodiversity and maybe suffer with other issues, like mental health issues, a lot of the stuff for treating mental health issues, a lot of the therapies don't really work that well. Or they kind of do, but you have to do them differently. So there's like CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, is the standard treatment for depression and anxiety on the National Health Service in this country, along with medications. And it doesn't often work for people who have ADHD, for example, because they can totally understand the concepts, but they can't apply them because they might, I don't know, it's hard to describe. It'll work in some ways, but not others. And the ways that it theoretically can work will be things like impulse control. Like, it might stop you from losing your temper about something immediately in the moment where you actually know what it is you're losing your temper about. But actually, it's incredibly hard for an ADHD person to control their kind of impulsive responses. So it can actually just make you feel worse about it because now you know how to stop yourself doing it, but you still can't. And then they might give you medication, which doesn't work either because it's wrong. So it's a whole thing.
Interesting. I was reading up about. Have you ever heard of alexithymia? Have you heard of that? I've been learning about it this week, and it's just like
Alexa what?
Alexithymia.
Never heard of that.
Yeah, so apparently that can be connected with ADHD. It can be connected, but it's a disconnect of emotions and empathy. But you can have empathy for an object. So, like for instance, our guitars, we can have empathy and emotions for objects rather than people and other things. Again, there's a rabbit hole, obviously, with all of these things in regards to whether it's ADHD and ASD and. But I was reading up this week and I was like, what? This is because I've been looking into, there's trauma therapy and all sorts of other things. Yeah. And is that going to be the thing that actually can connect with me rather than CBT? Because that's talking.
Well, there is CBT for ADHD. It's a separate thing. These days, I don't read about that kind of stuff. I just want to judge my own experience. So, for example, I am really empathetic. I'm never really sure what empathetic means. I'm certainly very sympathetic. So I do know what it means, but sometimes people use empathy when they really mean sympathy. So, but I am certainly both of those things. But it's much easier for me to be empathetic in a normal way or in a recognizable way to me with, say, somebody that I don't know, or somebody that's not real. So it could be, if I think about somebody suffering, if I imagine somebody suffering, it could really upset me. Whereas most people would realize that's in their imagination, maybe. But if it's somebody that I know and I care about that's suffering, then I might have a really strong emotional reaction to that, which is, as well as the empathy, I might have fear or anger or something else, depending on why they're suffering. I might have different responses, and then you have this weird disconnecting with those other emotional responses. Yeah. And this is the other ADHD thing, which is connected to that, which is that ADHD people are generally incredibly good in a really kind of big crisis that most people would be like getting a bit wobbly about. So you might see something terrible happen, like an accident happen, or somebody might be trying to start a fight or whatever. And you can, for good or ill, remain quite calm in that situation and kind of sort it out really rationally without having an emotional, you're not overwhelmed by the situation. You might be afterwards, but in the moment, it's like suddenly the world has reached your speed. Suddenly, you normally feel like you're going too fast for everything and everything's kind of, you're kind of plummeting through the world. But now suddenly the world is plummeting. So actually you're the one who's suddenly going, oh, wow, everything's now.
You can almost see it in slow motion.
Exactly.
They say it's like a Ferrari. Your brain's like a Ferrari, ADHD brain's like a Ferrari with bike brakes in some ways. And that's kind of, again, all these little phrases, everything is well thrown about and things. And obviously you've got to kind of make that subjective feeling about it. But you're right. There are those situations and then you're reeling from it afterwards. But I also don't think it gives you a chance to even think about that situation. Whereas if I'm on a way to a gig and I'm in the car, it's that whole process of just like, okay, overthinking for a whole car journey.
I probably used to do that. I find distraction is really, really good. And it's a technique that I've used in situations where somebody else might be upset or scared about something that they've got to do. So I'll distract them the same way that I might normally distract myself. I'll talk about completely different things. I'll notice everything in the space or the room or something that's happening in the world, and then really engage with that to completely distract myself from worrying about the thing that's going to happen. So that's, that's how I generally avoid that. So if I'm driving to a gig, I'll have music blasting that I'm really into and singing along to, or I'll be listening to a book, listening to like an audio book or something like that I'm really involved in. If you just kind of stick on talk radio or have music that you're kind of not paying attention to, or that you're able to not pay attention to, then I think you can go down rabbit holes, because that's what ADHD does really. It just leads you down all these thoughts sprouting off in different directions. And if you follow one of them, it'll take you along this kind of chain of doom, getting ever more terrifying.
And I met up with someone, because I've never actually met up with other people who have got ADHD, and I'm always told I'm monologuing, or I can jabber a lot when I go into those rabbit holes. And this conversation I had with this guy, it was like, I didn't realize it was 3 hours, but it was so convoluted. We were cutting each other up. We were going in all rabbit holes, but it was like, there's two analogies I have for it. I sort of find, and I don't know if you agree with this, but the music analogy I find of neurodivergence is like kind of, we see everything in stereo in regards to our mind. If we're focused on someone, we can still hear like, the heater going off there and then another sound going off there, but they're equal percentage. Whereas a lot of people can focus mono.
Well, I can't listen to a piece of music and listen to the whole thing all at the same time. So I can only listen to music or I feel like I'm noticing every individual bit, and then I'm noticing other bits. So I can hear the other bits as well, but my mind will constantly focus on this thing and the next, So maybe I'm listening to the bass or the drums or just the snare drum or just one singer, or I'm constantly kind of analyzing it or analyzing my own reaction to it or just something. So, as opposed to just listening to the whole thing like you're fucking supposed to. It's mindfulness. It's an absence of mindfulness I think is the best way to describe it.
And
Yeah.
so leading actually quite nicely on, I realized we didn't actually do an introduction at the beginning. So can we?
Feel free to edit it back in.
No. This is great. This is great.
Oh yeah. So who the fuck am I? Oh yeah. So this,
So,
Okay.
So, wow. Introduce. I mean, I've even got this guitar here from 2014 that you signed back in the years ago and stuff as well. So it's rubbing off. But you know,
asked me to, or was I just like?
Do you know what that was at the Q's Guitar Show? I think in London or something like random like that.
Okay,
it was. But John Gomm, in a nutshell of music, or it doesn't have to be a nutshell if we're speaking in ADHD terms, but I don't know, sort of summary, really.
Yeah. So I am a acoustic solo performer, singer-songwriter, and I'm best known for playing guitar in an unnecessarily technical and fancy way. Is the best way to describe it. So the song I'm best known for is called Passion Flower, and you can Google Passion Flower and it'll come up. You'll see a picture of a guy holding a guitar on the search engine. Well, I said Google already, I think. Can't help it. So, and yeah, that's kind of my biggest hit that I've ever had. And yeah, that's basically what I do. So I travel around playing guitar and stuff and singing, and that's it. Making records. That's kind of all there is to really explain. But yeah, and I'm also a mostly independent artist, and I am a dad, and I have, for the purposes of this podcast, I'll tell you, I have ADHD is my diagnosed condition. I'm probably on the ASD spectrum somewhere as well, but I kind of have never, I've never been diagnosed with that. And so I don't know. I mean, it's kind of such a three-dimensional spectrum of neurodivergences.
It's like a Venn diagram, isn't it, really? Like
yeah,
a Venn diagram.
A lot of things. Yeah, there's so many. And I feel like it is very much kind of, you can empathize. I can empathize with Tourette's, for example, very strongly. I don't have Tourette's, but I can certainly feel, I totally get it. So I think there's that's because that's part of that spectrum as well. And yeah, so the way those things interlink is, it's pretty extraordinary. But yeah, and I've also had various mental health conditions over the years, largely as a result of having undiagnosed ADHD for most of my life.
And was that a late diagnosis? Did you?
Yeah.
Because I remember seeing a video. I think you said you had, you maybe had a mate who, when you were growing up, about it, and and then did you always think you had ADHD, or was there other things that were like you kind of like, I wouldn't share. I've got a parent who's got bipolar, and then I went into crisis and everything as well, and I thought, right, this has got to be this, and then they were like, no, we don't think it's this, we think it's ADHD, and you're just like, oh my goodness, you're sort of like, it was the depression was the first diagnosed. They diagnose it, and then they just obviously throw the meds at you.
Of course.
And it's almost like
the problem with those medications is they can make ADHD worse. It depends what they give medicating you for, but you're lucky you didn't get medicated for bipolar. I did, and as a result of that, I have one pupil of my right eye is permanently larger than my left eye. Yeah, because ADHD is usually treated in terms of medications by increasing dopamine levels.
Yeah.
So your dopamine levels are too low. And if you take antidepressants, for example, then they increase serotonin levels usually. And that can impact your dopamine. That can reduce your dopamine levels a little bit, but it may well not. It may well be that, okay, if it lifts you out of depression, that will increase your dopamine levels because you're more able to be motivated to do things because you're not depressed. But the medications used for bipolar intentionally reduce dopamine levels, because if you have too much, if your dopamine spikes, then basically it's like you've done a load of cocaine and you're very happy and confident and optimistic and may do completely insane things, very dangerous things, extremely risky things, thinking that you'll be fine and you can do it. So that's kind of the bipolar up, the mania element of bipolar, which I was always diagnosed with bipolar for a long time, but I never thought that it really seemed to fit. And when they put me on a particular kind of medication for that, it made me, God, it was so bad. It really transformed my personality into something I didn't recognize.
Really?
And I couldn't control my hands either, my fingers properly, because my dopamine levels were so low. Dopamine as well as motivating you. So it makes you kind of want to do things. It also, dopamine is the neurotransmitter which controls the physical movement of your body, both voluntary and involuntary movement. So like trying to find motor control will be the first thing to go.
Mm-hmm.
But involuntary stuff like pupil dilation, heartbeat, it's pretty fucking scary that they would give you a drug to crush that down without being really sure what you've got. There's a really big problem with psychiatric profession, which most psychiatrists I know will say, yeah, this is a problem. I'm not kind of, coming at it from an external perspective only. And it's kind of a problem with medicine in general, the way it's structured. It's quite old fashioned. It's that you have, for example, an ear, nose and throat doctor, and you have a GI, gastrointestinal doctor, and they're separate fields. And if you've got a problem, which is you've got a gastrointestinal thing affecting your throat, which can totally happen,
mm-hmm.
It can be very tricky. You're caught between two completely different specializations, and it's like a cut-off line between the two, where it's like, okay, we don't really know what's wrong with you, and eventually maybe you get to see a gastroenterologist or something, the right doctor. But you haven't
got like an overarching, advisor or someone who's like,
with GPs do that, and I actually think GPs are pretty awesome. They're much maligned, but I think general practitioners are really, really important in that way. But with psychiatry, it's the same. So you'll have your kind of most common standard psychiatrist is about mood disorders and personality disorders. So depression, anxiety, bipolar, which is classed as a mood disorder, which I guess it is. And then personality disorders like borderline personality disorder or emotionally unstable personality disorder, which I have been diagnosed with in the past as one of the many wrong diagnoses, but it's actually getting closer to ADHD, at least in some ways, and so all those different personality disorders that, quite famous ones like narcissism or whatever. So that's kind of one kind of psychiatrist. Then you have the other completely separate kind of psychiatrist who deals in neurodevelopmental conditions, like primarily autism and ADHD. And they're completely separate. So if you go and see the most common kind of psychiatrist, who might be a very high-level specialist, they'll diagnose you with everything under the sun except ADHD, because that's just not in their wheelhouse. It won't even occur to them. And I don't know, you think you were really, really lucky to have somebody say, oh, we don't think you've got bipolar, we think you've got ADHD. I think you were really, really lucky to have that happen. I've never actually heard of that before happening. So
it's very, because I'm going into another episode of this, but this sort of the deep well of it is, I was always on the cusp. I think COVID, obviously, if you went into it with a mental crack or anything, if you've got trauma from your childhood or whatever it is, that it was such a vehicle, and especially homeschooling and trying to run a business, whatever it was.
It was horrendous, mate. I totally agree.
I think for everybody, and we're still reeling from it.
It wasn't for everybody. I know people who had a great time.
Yeah, I think my brain likes to think, this was everybody.
My cousin sending me photos of her with, with her feet on a table and a dog on her, with her fiance just eating eating a takeaway, saying, "Oh, I just finished work. We're a great time, really relaxing in lockdown. I hope it stays like this forever." Like,
oh man, I mean, and it's so hard to pin down, and that's probably why I've started the podcast. It's actually this. Like the amber section that I talk about, the improvised section, is almost like my tutor father hat talking to this inner child to kind of soothe it, and so doing it for myself. But when I went to the doctors, it was almost like, look, something's wrong. I've had a panic attack, and it was like immediately SSRIs. You can have them tomorrow. And I was like, all right, there's no tests, there's no assessments. And I was put on sertraline, and they're only supposed to have it, and that's like the default. You're only supposed to have it for 2 or 3 weeks. They left this for 6 to 10 weeks. And that's why I went into crisis. Then they put on metazapine, which is the sleeping one. And that, I think I agree with you with ADHD, where if you've got this thing trying to jump out of you all the time, and then you've got this SSRI, which is the sleeping drug, and it's almost trying to imprison it at the same time. You've got this huge conflict going on. Again, I don't really know the science. I only know it.
I know the science a lot more, so I'm not so interested in learning about the condition from from that point of view. To be honest, because I just spent years and years and years and years doing that with other conditions, depression, and I learned a lot, and anxiety and stuff. I learned a lot, which is still really, really useful. But then when I got diagnosed with ADHD, and I took the medication, it just fucking works. It's just like a miracle. So I just can't be bothered learning about it.
Do you feel a light just went on? This is what I've been told. When
I can't really describe it like that. It's really subtle. So I was very, very resistant to the diagnosis of ADHD. I got it because, to be honest, it was kind of a last resort. It was like, okay, nothing else is working. Nothing else fits. And I read about a family member said to me, don't you think you've got ADHD? And I said, no. And it's weird because I just started to think about a lot of things that people have said to me over the years, sometimes referencing ADHD, sometimes on comments on my YouTube videos saying, wow, this is the most ADHD guitar playing I've ever seen in my life, for example. And it's just silly, frivolous. That's not a diagnosis, but there's
bleeding.
There's a stereotype about ADHD, which is that it's naughty,
hyperactive
little boys, usually. When I was a kid, I found hyperactive, super energetic little boys sometimes really, really fun. So my best friend, when I was a little kid, I'm talking like from the age of I guess we were 1 or 2 years old, up to, I think he left the street where I lived when we were about 8 or 9. And he was really naughty boy and just constantly wanted to get into mischief. We were only little kids, but we were constantly pulling pranks or getting into trouble or doing things that we knew we weren't allowed to do, because he would always make us do that, and it was really, really fun. But he was diagnosed at that age, and I never knew this until recently. He was diagnosed with ADHD, or just hyperactivity as it was known then, usually, and put on Ritalin. And I know now that affected him really badly, and he was on it for years, through most of his childhood, and it's not been good for him, and it wasn't good for him kind of into adulthood, and it's really affected him. And he didn't have ADHD. He doesn't have ADHD. He was just a little shit. He just really enjoyed mischief and having fun.
Yeah.
And he had a lot of energy, but he didn't have ADHD. And I've heard that a lot from men, or adult men over the years. You say, yeah, I tell them I've got ADHD, and said, yeah, I was told I had that when I was a kid, and they put me on the drugs. It was awful. And they just don't ever feel like they did have that. And
do you feel, I mean,
whereas my childhood, I was very much I was always spaced out. I was very kind of physically uncoordinated. I would constantly be injuring myself, and I still do that now. I'm always having accidents and just walking into things.
Yeah.
I hit somebody in the head yesterday, not hard, But I bonked a lady on the head. But I think bonk is the best word. It's like a gentle bonk.
Right.
I was taking off my sweater. Didn't see for a moment. I've got very long arms, and I just bonked her on the head. And she just laughed. Thank God. And I was just so mortified. I'm gonna do that all the time. Stuff.
Were you reeling from that afterwards, though?
I'm all right now. And do you know what? It's better now because I know that stuff like this always happens, and it's probably always gonna happen. There's not really anything I can do about it. I could keep taking the medication, which makes it a little bit less likely to happen and makes me not fucking freak out when it happens and be absolutely mortified. Yeah. So I am mortified, but I'm not like an emotional wreck immediately. I am able to just deal with it and apologize, and which I could do anyway, but anyway, I can deal with it better in the moment than I could before. But I don't hate myself for it now because I know that it's kind of not my fault, or at least it's my responsibility, but it's not my fault. There's no point punishing myself for it.
Do you feel, when we were going back and we were talking about grief before, mm-hmm. Do you feel you've had this awareness and now you've had the medicine stuff? Do you feel there's an old John and a new John, or do you feel like everything's just kind of,
not really.
John's just like my mum would say, she's like out of everyone in my life, she's the first one to go, oh yeah, you still have time. That's just John. Like, it's like this kind of, that's just the identity and everything that's just come along with it is just...
Yeah, I know. Yeah, for sure. There is that. But I don't know. I don't feel like I've fundamentally changed. No, all the medication does is...
I just heard it sharpens focus and concentration.
It's very subtle. It doesn't affect... So it's very different to mental health medications. Because ADHD is not a mental health condition. It's a neurodevelopmental condition. It may well cause mental health conditions like depression and anxiety, especially if it's not treated.
It's not treated, yeah.
But it's not itself a mental health condition. And the most common drug for it, well, there's two. There's methylphenidate hydrochloride, which is most commonly known as Ritalin. And then there's dexamphetamine, mm-hmm. which is basically pure amphetamine. Which in this country is most commonly, I think Amphexor is the most common brand. So all the science stuff I know all about, but that's just because I love science. So the way they work is they're basically dopamine reuptake inhibitors. Well, Ritalin is a dopamine reuptake inhibitor, whereas the other one actually just pumps dopamine into your brain, almost like forces it to make dopamine. So it's kind of more powerful. I forgot what. So yeah, they don't change your mood. They don't change your mood. So because they don't change your mood, you don't feel like your personality has changed at all. I found that SSRIs were much more likely to change my personality because they change your mood, which is a factor of your personality over a period of time. It's like if you have like your moods that are very fleeting, but then if your mood on average over a period of months or years changes, then it's effectively a personality change. Whereas with the ADHD medications, because dopamine isn't like, it's not an emotional neurotransmitter, it doesn't make you feel happy or it doesn't make you feel love like oxytocin, or it just is about, it's a doing neurotransmitter. It makes you want to do stuff, and it makes your body function and do stuff, like this movement. So it doesn't seem to affect your personality at all. The way that I would describe it working, the first time I took it, I could tell something had changed, but I couldn't tell what it was. I didn't feel any different. It was a bit like getting off a ship. So if you've been on a ship at sea, for like a few days, then you get off and stand on the land, and it's like,
it's still,
fuck, it's really still. It's weird. You don't notice that you've been compensating all that time that you've been on this ship. After a while, you get used to it, the movement. You don't notice that you're compensating for it all the time. And it just feels like everything is still.
The thought patterns and processes, because obviously I was
Yeah,
told it's like having crossroads at your, frontal cortex, and then you kind of, there's no traffic warden there or whatever it is. I mean, there's lots of analogies.
So
and then it can wake up.
all
and
of
then
the
you can have,
all the stuff's still there. So if you imagine that, say you normally have 7 TVs in your head all playing at the same time, for example, might be a way of describing it. But you have 7 different offshoots. So you could be thinking about something and there's 7 different other things, which are equally as important as the thing that you were thinking about. So, you were thinking about this thing and then suddenly you've got all these other things that have just sprouted off. And they're all equally important as the thing you're actually trying to fucking think about. But when the medication, the difference it makes is that you still have those things. You still have all the different TVs going, all those different offshoots or those different distractions. But you can actually choose which one to watch. Or you can choose, if you have this thing you're trying to think about and it makes all these other things sprout off it, you can choose to ignore those and stick with the one that you.
It becomes the back and band as such, and then you're like,
and it's not as obvious as I've described it. Not for me anyway. It's not like as, but that's the best way that I can describe it. But I find it to be subtle, but absolutely over a period of time, absolutely transformative to my ability to function, basically. So,
has it changed?
Yeah.
Like you said, it doesn't change personality and things, but I tried an experimental one called olanzapine, I think it was. But I was doing this along SSRI, so I think I was just completely fucking up my body, the different chemicals and stuff. And I've never taken any.
Everything's chemicals.
So yeah, you're chemicals. Just kind of so, just.
It was don't like stress too bad about that. A lot of people, they'll drink anything, smoke anything, but it's like, oh no, I'm not taking any medication. It's chemicals. It's like, holy shit.
Do you think with?
So I wouldn't.
Has it adapted?
Sorry, you were saying what? Yeah, go on. Sorry.
Musically, do you feel if you go to your guitar, do you feel there's any difference now so when you were writing and putting together Passion Flower and Ain't Nobody and other arrangements?
Yeah, it's better now.
You just do you still have?
You still have loads of ideas. It doesn't really make any difference to me in that way.
No,
but I'm more able to follow a thread, which is also really important, and get to the end point. It used to be a case that I would feel like I was flinging ideas like at a wall, like flinging paint at a wall, and occasionally like an image would form, and maybe I could try and make it into something, and it was really chaotic. And it might take me months to write a tune, but not because I'm sitting there painstakingly making it for months, although I am really painstaking. That's my natural personality. So I want to make things in a really painstaking way and create these complex kind of architectural structures, musically speaking, complex kind of musical structures on the guitar. But it would feel quite like chaotic and like a lot of luck was involved. And now it feels more like I'm able to be ordered and also see problems as they arise, or see things that are just make a judgment about something and like, actually that's shit. Stop writing that bit. Don't just go down that rabbit hole because you're doing it. Because you're just on that path. Actually say, actually no, just stop that. So yeah, I'm much more able to write stuff as far as I can tell. It makes it easier.
Do you think the luck before was because you had 7 channels going on at the same time? It's almost like if an idea was able to get through.
No, it's much more like here's 6 months. And now every kind of maybe one day every 2 months, you'll go, right, okay, now I can write a bit of this tune. And then that's it. And then you forget about it, and then you come back to it. So it's that's the reason that it was luck. It was over a period of time. But it's it definitely, like, ADHD is definitely an aid to creativity, but all that means is you have a lot of ideas, and it's so normal. So for example, you might say, okay, I think I might, I'm going to go on a trip tomorrow. I'm going to go and take a day trip to this lovely town. And then your ADHD might then think of a million things you could do instead of that, or a million things you could do while you're there, or a million reasons not to do it. That's not helpful. And some of that is not helpful. A lot of that is massively breeding anxiety, because you'll think of a million problems. ADHD people are really good at finding solutions to problems really quickly, and maybe a million solutions to the same problem. But they're also really good at just finding the problems themselves, almost in order that you can then solve them. And also, I've got quite a good problem-solving mind. I'm crap. My mind is really crap in a lot of ways. It's really disordered, and I'm not very good at kind of practical things. But I am quite logical. So I'm quite good at problem-solving. But the thing is, just because you've thought of a solution to a problem doesn't mean that you can ever do it, or that the solution will even work. Or that you've even thought about the problem correctly in the first place. So you might have solved the problem, but the problem might be wrong that you're trying to solve. So creativity, if all it came down to was just how many ideas you've got, then that would be great. ADHD people would be artistic, creative, or marketing or business geniuses. But it doesn't, because you can think of a million ideas and they can all be shit. And to be honest, probably I can't work out the number, 900,909. That's not right. 999,999 ideas out of a million are not that great, or certainly not revolutionary and genius level. So, it doesn't come down to that. That's not what creativity is. So you don't
I suppose with creativity, that's why with your music, and I know very much with my music, and I mean it's gone into different avenues and things, but this is why I suppose the importance of writing something for yourself, doing something for yourself first, and how much it emotionally connects with, so like you're saying, the ideas could work and everything as well, and the song ideas, but I suppose if it works for me, if it evokes emotion every time I pick up my guitar and I play it, and even out of a host of like 80 songs that I may have created, there might be only like 5 to 8 core, high quality songs that connect with milestones from my life, and every time I play them they evoke that emotion. I suppose, do you get that with your process of songwriting and composing, where it sounds very obvious, you do it for yourself first rather than thinking about anything that's, if you're going to release this, which the ADHD can do, the curiosity of
I don't care about that. I've never cared about that. I might be a lot more successful if I did, but I don't do that. I just can't. And I don't know. I just don't.
I mean,
like
when Passion Flower came out, it's probably, and you've probably watched it. I don't know if you've seen High Ren, that's just come out over the last 6 months and stuff as well. But
I know. Yeah.
So to me, Passion Flower, not musicality or anything as well, but the impact I've watched for both, for me, I had when I watched High Ren recently, and I've watched it like twice. I did the same as when Passion Flower came out. It was one of those where how I got into fingerstyle is I carved a hole at the back of a nylon guitar and I stuck a snare drum at the back of it, and that was my introduction to fingerstyle for a guitar recital. And I was like, I had no idea about the science or anything about it. And then I started getting into things. And then when Passion Flower dropped, I was just like, oh my word! Like you've gone outside of the boundaries without consciously knowing you've gone outside the boundaries of songwriting and other things. But it was, I'm probably going convoluted here. I probably don't even know what I'm talking about. But
keep going. I believe in you, John. Keep going.
there is a point. There is a point. I think the point is that when you were developing something like Passion Flower, do you still get that same feeling of when you were writing it, when you released that video? Do you still get that same feeling every time you perform it now on tour?
Well, that song.
Does it connect and with you every single time you play it? I get that with there's a track with Lost at Sea or Wind Chime or whatever.
Not really. I don't know. No, not. It connects with me more now than it did then because I'm more able to be open to that and experience those things directly. I'm less kind of scared of it overwhelming me, which if I let kind of emotions in too much in the past, if I was playing or performing, I would get really overwhelmed. Like I just wouldn't be able to really play if I really did that. And I learned how to do that over the years more or in a more controlled way. But when I'm writing music, I don't think about how is this going to affect other people? Are they going to like it? Are they not? I just think about what is it that I am trying to achieve? What's the point of this?
Yeah.
And that can only come from myself, really. Although it does relate to the world. Like sometimes I might write music because I think the world needs that. But that's not to say that then everyone's going to hear it and it's going to change the world or anything like that. It's just that we all exist in our own version of the world because we all absorb different, we all live in a different physical place and different family around us, but then a different town, a different country and we all take in different parts of the media if we do, if any. So we see the world differently. So somebody could live in the same house as somebody else, but watch a different TV channel, and one of them's normal and one of them's a fucking psycho. Because they just absorb terrifying news media, which has turned their brain to a lump of coal. just kind of a slowly, gently burning lump of coal. It's kind of how I imagine it. But so I might want to write a piece of music that changes the world, but what I mean is just my world. It just reflects a part of the world that I see, and then having vocalized it through the form of a song makes me feel better about it, or like I'm doing something about it, or like I've at least spoken about it loudly. Even if I never play that song to anybody, that's the kind of experience of writing. That's why we need to talk about those things.
Do you feel those songs? Yeah. Do you feel Passion Flower is now a milestone? It represents a milestone of that particular life, or is it just continuous?
It doesn't, because it was really successful. So it does in terms of, you could say there's a before and after that, but not before and after writing it. I do like it, which really, really helped. And so I'm quite lucky that I had a viral video. So, for example, I have fingerstyle guitarist friends whose big kind of viral hit, if they're lucky enough to have one, is a cover, and they're happy to play it. They kind of have to play it when they perform, but it's not a song. They might not even have covered it because they really like that song, which I think is a terrible mistake. If you're going to cover something, just do it because you love it, surely. But or they might, like, so Andy McKee, I don't know how he feels about it like right now, but Andy McKee, fingerstyle instrumental guitarist, and his kind of super big breakout hit was Drifting, so he has to play it. I've never seen him live, and he hasn't played it, and he didn't seem to like it very much when I was talking to him. I don't know how he feels now, but he I know him pretty well, and it's like, it's just he doesn't think much of it musically. I'm like, no, dude, it's good. I like it. I think he thinks he writes really beautiful, emotive, melodic stuff. Yeah. And that one, the melody's a bit plinky plonky compared to his other stuff.
So like Rylan.
Actually, I like it. I love it. And I tell him how important it is as well, because I knew about percussive guitar and stuff. But when I heard that tune, which is long before YouTube, I heard it
I heard it on Candy Rack. I can't remember where it was. 2000.
So I think it was released in 2007.
Yeah, some of that.
But I heard it probably about 2000 because he posted an MP3 on a Michael Hedges message board that we both went on.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, I heard it and I worked out how to play it. I played it completely wrong, actually. I was tapping the notes in the wrong place. But I told him at the time, and I had to remind him many years later, that he was the first guy I'd ever heard do that style of percussive guitar, but make it melodic as he played it. Nobody had done that before. And they hadn't.
Yeah.
Not in that way, where it's like it's just simple singable melody. And it was like, oh, yeah, I suppose you're right. Said, no, it's important. That's why people love it, but that's not the only reason. It's also got a cool vibe, And but it's funny because the fact that he didn't like playing it, when I saw him play it live, he would almost be a bit angry as he played it, as if he slightly resented the music that he was playing.
So like those pop stars who have to sort of bring out one of their greatest hits,
But it was awesome because I told him, it's like, because you've got this slight edge when you play it. He's not an edgy guy. You know what everybody is, but in general, certainly the way he is on stage, he's super lovely and relaxed, and he's not kind of he's just not an in your face kind of guy. But when he plays that song, it makes him there's a little bit of anger in his playing that isn't normally there, and I really like it. But anyway, it's really, really forensic examination of Andy McKee's live performance of drifting. So yeah, but I feel very fortunate that my viral success pop hit video or whatever was a song that it's one of my favorite songs that I've written, and I'm always happy to play it. It does connect with people emotionally, like the lyrics and stuff seems to. So when I play it live, people are really happy to hear it. And I know that every time I play it live, there'll be people somebody at the end of every gig will come up to me and say, oh, I've been following your music since I was a kid, which is quite depressing. I've been following Grandad John. I've been following your music since I was a kid. I remember when I first heard Passion Flower. And now finally, 10 years later, I've seen you play it live. It's amazing. So it's for at least one person in the room, that'll be, a really special moment for them. So yeah, it never gets old. That never.
And the depth of the song. I mean, lyrics and everything as well. How transformative. Obviously, I keep an eye on posts and tattoos, and whether it's been messages, it's been.
Yeah,
it's those things. And I suppose, like you said, if you've got a song that's gone viral, but you kind of it's just connected on so many levels for people.
But it feels like, look, to be honest, it does feel like, look, even just the writing of it feels like, look, certainly the lyrics.
And then
was
Ain't Nobody on the back of that? Was Ain't Nobody on the...
Yeah, that was because I did I used to do session work for these guys who did remixes. And they sent me a CD that I was on. I'd played guitar on a remix of, I can't remember what it was, but they used to do quite a lot of covers. So, for example, I remember going into the studio and playing Sweet Child of Mine, So I borrowed a Les Paul from a guitar shop and just plugged it into like a amp simulator. And they recorded that because it was cheaper to get me to play it than it was to pay for the a cappella. An a cappella is like a generic word in remixing circles for like one track. So usually it refers to the vocal. So if you want the a cappella of a track, what you mean is I want the vocal without the backing. Because a lot of old studios like Motown, even though everything was recorded on 4 tracks, that's all they had. And then if they wanted to do anything else, they had to bounce it. So they had to take 2 tracks and re-record them onto one empty track of tape. Okay, but they were very clever. They always kept the lead vocal on one completely separate track. I don't know why. Maybe they just looked forward in time and thought people might want these vocals for remixing, or if there was just another reason, but they always seem to do that. But anyway, they even call, if they want to buy just the guitar section of Sweet Child of Mine from the original, whoever owns it, whatever record label, then it's quite expensive to do that. It's much cheaper. Still got to pay the rights, but it's much cheaper to pay me, just a day fee to go into a studio. And this is a long time ago. But I just remember on that album, there was Ain't Nobody by Shaka Khan. There's a remix of it. I listened to it and this is fucking great, this song. I hadn't really listened to it consciously maybe before. I'd heard it, but not really. So, wow, this is amazing. Like, it's just such a great song. I love the synthy bits, but the way it's got that massive kind of groove. And I also just noticed how the bass and the vocal melody, like, it goes, ba-ba-da-da. There's a bit of bass, da-da-da-da, and then the vocal. It's always separate. It's like, oh, that'd make it really handy for playing on guitar. So I don't have to try and do them at the same time.
Yeah.
So I ended up making it incredibly complicated anyway. But yeah, I just thought, oh, I'll have a go at arranging that. And I literally did it in a day, as far as I know.
Wow.
I probably did change it a lot after that. But certainly the nuts and bolts of it were done there and then on a really shitty guitar, actually, as well. I think my guitar was being repaired, so I had this really shitty old guitar that I did it on. Yeah, but I find doing arrangements for other people's stuff quite challenging. But I've been doing some at the moment. So once my wrist is better, I'm going to start recording those.
Because you did a Kate Bush one as well. Was that?
That's just part of another song. That just was a thing that used to just happen live, and I ended up recording it. So I quite like the thing where when you're playing live, you might just segue into a cover and then go out of it again, back into your own song.
Right, yeah.
Although maybe the cover has left its footprint on your song, as if you're listening to the radio and then you switch stations and something else playing on the other channel. And then maybe you switch back, but you're stuck between the stations and you can kind of hear both of them. And I love that. I love quotes and of other people's stuff within songs, or I love sampling. I think it's amazing. It's really thrilling when you listening to a track that's got a sample and you recognize the sample and the song that it's originally from. I find, if you like it, if you like the remix, or it's not even necessarily a remix. Like I remember hearing that Labby Sifri thing on Slim Shady by Eminem. It's like an old song from the 70s, and hearing that going, oh, that's a banging sample. It just completely out of context, but actually it's like pretty much his whole tune is that sample. His vocal over the top completely changes the context of it. Yeah, so that's it's really cool. It's really creative and fun.
And connecting those things. And
I mean, he has autism, by the way, if you didn't know. Eminem has
autism. Really? No, I didn't know that either. But I suppose with musically, with the neurodivergent musician life that I'm going to call it and stuff, do you find touring, recording and things as well? And you've done it enough now probably to kind of get used to it, but
no.
Or do you get used to it?
No, it's so hard. It got harder and harder and harder as well. So
I mean, being a dad as well, that adds,
Yeah, that's the thing about ADHD is it builds up, right? So you've been suffering with it all your life and really struggling with things that you have no reason to be struggling with necessarily, It could be social stuff, or it could be practical stuff. It could be traveling. It could be touring. It could be anything. It could be work, social, family, all of them. And then you have a kid as well on top of that, or something else in your life, but that's a really common one. And suddenly it's like, maybe you can handle the first kid and then the second kid happens. And then it's like, at some point there's a tipping point where you can no longer cope.
Yeah.
And that's often when people end up getting diagnosed in, there's a global pandemic or all of the above. And you end up, there's a tipping point. It's like, okay. And that's when adults end up, getting diagnosed finally because they need treatment. But yeah, for me, the thing about touring with ADHD is that when you're traveling, it's very stimulating to the senses. There's a lot of stuff. There's endless distraction because you're in a different place. Everything, like for me, I've been to places like China on tour or Mongolia. So everything's different. Like the temperature's different. The climate is different. The surroundings are different. The geography is different. The buildings are different. The people, obviously the language is different. Everything smells different because all the food is different. You don't ever see it's not that you can't read the signs. It's that, because you don't speak languages, you can't even read the letters because it's different lettering. So everything,
there's no familiarity.
From the moment
whatsoever.
you wake up to the moment you go to sleep, it's very difficult to forget that you are in a faraway place and there's constant distractions and constant stimulation. And that, for somebody with ADHD, is absolutely exhausting. Absolutely exhausting. And it's very exciting and fun. And if you're traveling just for fun, people with ADHD can be great at that because they get stuck in and explore and whatever.
Well, also,
but if you're working and you've got to play gigs in front of like hundreds of people every night, it's wow. It's very, 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 very stressful.
You got to try and switch it on, and it's the
stage is the only place that when I'm traveling, the stage is the only place that I feel totally safe. And
is that from the first song, or do you need this kind
just
of?
the moment I step on it, because it's still, you still got everybody looking at you. You might be nervous or you might not, but in terms of like, when I'm on stage, I can do anything and say anything because, I learned a long time ago that you don't have to pretend to be normal. You can take the mask off on stage and people like it. It's kind of, that's all right. You can just say ridiculous things or fall over. Who fucking cares? It's just a thing that happened. It's all entertaining. And, you can just express yourself emotionally. There's nobody there that I have to interact with. There's an audience, but that's a totally different thing to a one-on-one interaction. So I can't offend anybody, say the wrong thing, say something stupid, confuse anybody, get confused myself. I can't be late now. I can't break anything. I can't, because I'm already there. I'm on the stage. That's fine. Whatever has happened before has happened. So yeah, often that's the only time that I can really relax. But often it's too late. I'm so strung out from the overwhelm that I've been experiencing already that I'm a nervous wreck on stage, but not because I'm nervous about playing, but because I was a nervous wreck anyway. So yeah, it never got easier.
When you're on stage,
it is easier now. It is easier now because now I understand why that's the case, and I'm able to cope with it better, and I'm also medicated, which massively helped. So yeah, it's much easier now.
Being on stage, I mean, because you're on it, for so long over the tour, it's the only place you can emulate that safe space. Because for me, if you're in China, if like you're saying, if you're in a different country and there's no familiarity whatsoever, the stage is the only familiar place that makes it feel safe. Like you said, safe.
Yeah, I mean, everyone is different, but no, it definitely is. Do you know what even starts before that? It's when I get up to do the sound check. It's the mic stand and then putting my gear out and plugging it in. It's like, oh yeah, okay, I know where I am now.
That process of plugging it
is the same everywhere. You're right. Yeah, that is what it is. It probably is because it's familiar and it's the same everywhere. It's not the same, but it's the same enough. And suddenly I know exactly what I'm doing.
Well, because you can work out your distances of like where you are from the pedal board and like the mic. There's a process, I imagine, and also
maybe
when you start plugging in your pedal board and then you can start running your leads and then you can start doing your adapter. Anything like that is kind of like familiar territory of
it is
setting thing. And there's all this mindfulness of, okay, right, for the next I don't know how many hours, I can actually, there's still chaos going around all the time. And maybe people come up, sound guys who maybe not speak English and things as well. And you're like, it's fine. We'll kind of get used to it. But, and I imagine, you're the same with your pedal board, in a way that because I know, we've got similar pedal boards, but I know you've got something slightly different. I need to upgrade mine when I'm going to do tour and stuff. But I've tweaked EQs. I've done all sorts of stuff. So I'm literally can go to places and plug in and then mask outside. So there's this, I don't know, there just feels this calmness of
I don't know. I guess so. Yeah, I think it is. I think Yeah. I mean, the main problem that over a lifetime of kind of, getting into trouble. So I'd constantly be in trouble. And so I'd either be doing something wrong that I'm not allowed to do but not realizing, or kind of realizing, but hoping for the best, or I'd be lost, or I'd be late. And being lost when you're in a different country on your own can be like a bit scary,
Yeah.
And I think over a period of time, it's the same as anxiety, or it's basically anxiety builds up because you don't trust yourself anymore. You just don't trust yourself, and on top of that, you might blame yourself. So, that's a really, really big issue, I think, for people with ADHD in all kinds of ways. Is that you don't trust yourself. And also with ADHD, you react to things before you've thought about it. So you're speaking before you've thought about what you're going to say. And you might do something impulsively, and then it might turn out to be the wrong thing. And so you literally kind of can't trust yourself. And that's really, really tough for a musician on tour.
Is that something that's similar to, if you're ever having an argument with someone? I used to do this all the time. I'd be on the way home and I'm already having that conversation with that person even before I've started having the real conversation. And it's that kind of process before I've made it. I've worked it all out in my head that this is how it's going to go, and it sort of never does. But with your touring as well, do you have someone that goes along with you, or are you
usually not? I prefer not to.
Right.
It depends. I can, but it's got to be somebody that I already know really well. Although I don't know, that might change. We'll see. I could give it a whirl. So there's not many people in the world, to be honest, that I would want to tour with. So generally I'm on my own, but that's actually not that abnormal as people might think. Often even when people are in a tour party, they're quite separate, because you do get touring parties, whether it's a band or whatever, who seem to live like a fucking family all the time. And that's great, or sometimes it is. Sometimes it's really toxic, but often it's great. But you do get tour parties where they spend so much time together, they kind of don't want, what they get really good at is just being alone while they're all together, because that's what they actually want.
Yeah.
So it's pretty tough, but I'm not great at touring with people that I don't know. I get really worried about what they might be thinking about me, or whether I might be doing the wrong thing, or So,
I used to be in lots of bands, and then I just when I jumped over to solo, I miss the musicianship. I miss the thing. I just don't miss all the rest of it. And that's why I'm like, as much as I go on my own, it is chaotic. It's almost like, contained chaos that's not bleeding out over to everyone else. And we're not getting politics, and also their chaos is then bleeding into my chaos and things as well. So,
okay, so I'm never really alone, because I've got my manager, who organizes everything before I go. So all I've got to do is basically follow a schedule.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's kind of, it's way easier. It's not like I'm just improvising when I get there. I'm not that great at that. I need I need to know exactly what I'm supposed to be doing when I get to each place. So everything is kind of booked in advance. So if I've got to hire a car, it's already been booked and paid for, and I've just got like a thing on my phone or something printed out that I have to give to them. And so it's all kind of done for me, usually, which is really, really lucky. And I'd really struggle without that. But I can really struggle with it. But these days I kind of I'm more able to trust myself a little bit. I know that I'm probably going to be okay. I'm probably going to be able to handle what happens. But sometimes you just have complete nightmares on the road, and that happens to everybody, ADHD or not. So yeah, that can just happen.
Cool. So I suppose to sort of wrap it up, I mean, for musicians, maybe, I mean, I read a stat that 70 to 80% of musicians have mental health issues. And, I'm not looking at, I'm using this podcast to kind of.
That's really, really bleak. That's really awful.
And you know what? It's just like, well, there is this norm that, and I grew up with it. And I imagine a lot of other musicians, it's like the norm is we have to struggle. And, I suppose I'm using this podcast. Well, when you were talking about touring, actually, and then when you're on stage, you get to this. Some of the solo episodes, just so nice, just being able to just open out. Well, what I'm trying to do is
not like that. I just want to put that out there, and also to you, it's that I don't believe that's statistic for a start, and secondly, I'm good, so I'm okay. And it's not. We've been talking about all the negative stuff, but the fact that I'm able to do it at all. And the fact that I'm kind of have to do it is great. Yeah. So I couldn't have a job. I could 9-to-5 job. And sometimes I say like to my wife, oh, God, I'm so tired. I have to do so much kind of pressure and stuff. I wish I could just work 9-to-5 in an office. And she just says, you would last 3 days. You would last 3 days. And then you would just go out of your fucking mind.
Mm-hmm.
And she's right. I'd be so bored. I remember I once did a residency somewhere. No, I played like this event. It's a really long time ago. And I played 4 days in a row at the same place. And I had to drive to the same city and home about an hour. So I had to do the same drive and then set up in the same place, in the same room, 5 days in a row. And by the 5th day, I couldn't believe that I was doing the same thing. I was killing me with boredom by like my wife said, by the 3rd day. And that was just playing a gig in this, not like a residency. It was like this kind of long-running corporate event thing. It's such a long time ago. Anyway, yeah. So it's like it's really great that you can do that, and that you either have to do it, or that you're able to achieve it, or you're forced to achieve it, or whatever. And every musician that I know, as they get older, they've either quit because it's too much, or because a lot of you do find with a lot of musicians. You're out doing a gig. For you, it's a Monday night or a Tuesday night or a Wednesday night. But for the audience, it doesn't matter what night of the week it is. This is their Saturday night. They're going to a gig. They're going to have fun. Okay, so you're constantly within reach of a bar. So there's a lot of issues with like alcoholism and drugs as well for musicians, and that's definitely a thing. And it's a way that some people can cope, but then you can't cope like that indefinitely. So you get. When musicians, they start to get older, they're like, no, I don't want to tour anymore. They're just going to stay at home with their family. Or they've kind of figured it out. And some people are just great at it from when they're really young. And I know musicians who are just built for the road. They're just really, really good at it. They just really love existing that way. And that's totally cool as well. And also for people with autism or issues where you lack routine or you need routine. So with ADHD, I'm terrible at routine. I've tried over the years so many times to force myself to have a routine, a daily routine or something, so I'm productive in my life. And it's funny because since getting diagnosed with ADHD, I've realized there's no point. Post-diagnosis, I tried one more time to draw up like a routine that I could kind of stick to. And it was just, I realized, no, I can't do this. And also, I'm never going to be able to do this. So let's just go with it. And by going with it, I'm actually way more productive than by trying to force myself into a routine. But when I'm on the road, I do have a routine. I get up, I have breakfast, get in the car, drive somewhere, stop for lunch, drive to the venue or possibly the hotel if there's time, sound check, dinner, gig, go back to the hotel, go to sleep, and then that's it. And then I repeat every day. So it's the only time you have any routine in my life is when I have this forced routine of being on the road. So it's actually really healthy for me in that way. I don't stress about all the things that I'm normally stressing about, because living a normal life is hard when you have ADHD, because you don't remember to do the washing, or you might not remember to cook for yourself at the right time, or you might not go to bed when you're supposed to go to bed, and you might not be able to stop yourself having a drink or eating crap that you shouldn't be eating. So when you're on the road, it can actually be really good for you. So it's really, it's not like mental health and music is like some kind of toxic relationship. I really don't believe that. So I just wanted to put that out there as a positive.
No, definitely. And I suppose for me, with even those things I sort of mentioned stuff, is with neurodiversity, it's kind of, and I suppose I'm just spreading awareness. I'm just want to sort of getting the conversations talking amongst lots of musicians. But I don't know, would you give any tips or any advice to those musicians who are kind of that may think they have these things, and if that's the case in regards to ADHD and things as well? Because I know there's a lot of things. Obviously, there's your TikTok trends and all sorts of stuff as well. And
you know what? I've said quite a lot about things that I want to say. So it's like, you've got to learn to trust yourself, even if you can't, even if you literally can't, because you know that you fuck things up. Well, trust yourself to do that, because what you've got to learn to do is cope when you fuck things up, and not blame yourself, not feel horrendous about it. So you just got to learn to deal with that kind of emotional stuff, and you've got to be yourself. So that's really generic advice, just saying be yourself. But what I mean is, with ADHD and autism, there's a thing called masking. So you pretend a lot of the time. You're trying to force yourself to kind of appear normal. And you don't have to do that as a musician. You don't have to worry about how you dress, because often people with ADHD might dress funny and look, because you just get so bored. You just want to wear weird shit because it's interesting. Tattoos and weird hair or whatever. It's not everybody with ADHD, but it's common. So, that's okay. All this stuff, as you can just let it out as a musician, and it's important that you do. But to be honest, my main advice for ADHD, which is the only thing I can speak to really with any vague authority, is that you can't use it as an excuse, but you can use it as a reason not to blame yourself. And the most important thing about accepting that you are a certain way, that your brain works a certain way, is that it enables you to take responsibility. So this is not really musician advice, it's just life advice. But with ADHD, or there's a lot of other conditions that can make you feel this way, you can sometimes feel like, okay, I've made a mistake. How do I get out of it? Something's gone wrong. How can I make this so that it's not my fault? How can I so often ADHD people can get really into arguments where they're defending themselves in a kind of an untenable position. And this can happen with anybody. You don't have to have ADHD. But for me, the most important thing is to take responsibility. And by kind of accepting that you are the way you are, it frees you to take responsibility and apologize for things that you do wrong, or mistakes that you make, or just for being late, or for fucking something up. Just take responsibility for it and say, well, I'll just try to do better next time. That's what you say to yourself. I'll just have to try to do better next time. That's really, really important. It's so healthy for you, and it's so healthy for everybody around you to just, be, it's the most boring thing anybody's ever said on a musician's podcast, but just be really responsible as a person. Just be really responsible. That doesn't mean be boring. It just means that, just got to take stuff that you do and own it.
with
Really
acceptance as well. I mean, when you got your ADHD diagnosis, I mean, did you accept it?
No, I really railed against it. I just couldn't really handle that I had ADHD. Firstly, because I didn't feel like it fit the stereotype. The stereotype of ADHD didn't fit kind of the self-portrait of myself that I'd drawn in my head. But that turns out that firstly, my stereotype of ADHD was wrong, and also the self-portrait I'd drawn in my head was wrong, because I was trying to kind of find a way of justifying to myself why I was so unable to cope so much of the time. But those ways were wrong. They were just stories I was telling myself, and they were stopping me from being able to be a responsible person. And I really resisted it for just another reason as well, which was that I spoke to this this doctor, and she said she saw that I was struggling with it and didn't really want to accept it. And she said, there's two types of ADHD. You have both. And I was like, all right. And I said, like, are you sure? And she said, sometimes I'm not sure. Sometimes it's like, I'm kind of not sure. And sometimes a psychiatrist will try you on a very low dose of the medication and see whether it works or not. Because that's ultimately the only kind of scientific method way that we can be 100% sure of our diagnoses as psychiatrists. But in your case, you've just got ADHD. I've got absolutely no doubt, and it's rare that I would say this. It's like you've got quite bad level of ADHD, particularly inattentive ADHD, but mental hyperactivity is off the charts as well. So, and she also said, but we're going to treat it, and you're not going to believe how much you've been struggling and what the difference is. And it was actually that, and then when I was treated and it kind of worked, that made me really depressed, because I was grieving, as we were originally talking about, for myself, really. And for like the kid that I was when I was like a little kid, and I was so like, just remember being 5 years old, going to school and being fucking terrified of being at school, really hating it. I was so scared of it because I didn't know what the fuck was going on. There were so many people and so much stuff happening, even though it probably wasn't. It was just a normal school, but I really struggled. I couldn't interact with the other kids very well. I just hated it. I hated the chaos. I hated the fact that I wasn't somewhere that I wanted to be. And, it's just, and then all through kind of my life, I struggled in so many ways. And I thought, well, all of that, it's just because of this. It's just because of.
And at the age.
This. And it was just.
Do you feel now it's like
I knew about that.
Are you going back through your whole life again? No, not consciously, but does it subconsciously? You go back through your whole life and then start to look at different events.
Well, it's a super ADHD thing to do that. So it's a super ADHD thing that one of your TVs, that's if you've got 7 TVs blasting on it, at least one of them is probably constantly playing reruns. Like
ADHD, right? Hyper focusing on ADHD.
So it's like okay, so I've got one telly in my head that's constantly playing reruns of this awful thing that happened or this awful thing that happened. And they could be very serious things or they could be less serious things. But there's certainly things that have upset you or traumatized you or just you've been embarrassed or whatever, and it won't stop playing in your head. So actually, once you're medicated, it's a lot easier to not have those things constantly going on because they're awful. They're awful. Nobody wants to constantly watch a movie of the worst things they think have ever happened to them in their lives in their own head,
The only thing I've had, I used to, when I was growing up, I used to put my knees up on a chair and I used to bang my head against the side of this chair and for comfort. And I was what 5, 6, and I still vividly remember it. But then since I learned about autism and things as well, and again, I'm going through the process and both assessments and everything. I'm in this limbo land at the moment and things as well.
People, I've done stuff like that and thought it was like self-harm, reading about stuff and thinking, well, this is a form of self-harm. I used to scratch myself with my, until I would bleed sometimes, or I would hit my head. So I would do that as a repeated thing. Sometimes I'd do it if I was, it's usually because I'd be distressed. So it's like, well, I'm doing this in response to being distressed, but it's not self-harm. It is a comfort thing and it's like a distraction thing, but it's a kind of form of stimming, but I'm like self-stimulation. So like some people will just like constantly bounce a ball for example,
Yeah.
or have some other way of occupying themselves.
And do you feel
I do that. I've been sitting here fiddling with. I've constantly have to fiddle with something all the time. I can't stop myself doing that. Or I have to be eating something.
Awareness and education now has given you closure on those things. Like if you thought they were something else that you were growing up, and then you've now.
I never thought they were anything except I just thought. Well, I guess I didn't know what they were, or I just thought that I was just unhinged, really.
Well, that's
So it's just So it's a lot easier to accept those things, and also I don't really do them so much anymore. And also I do have coping strategies. So after I got diagnosed and I did start to accept it, I got therapy.
Yeah,
but I mean, I've seen therapists in the past, but this was a therapist who deals with people with autism and ADHD, mostly children, but also adults who've been diagnosed in later life. And it's completely different. She was completely different. So I don't, she doesn't want me to talk about my parents particularly, usually. It's more like, what are your problems that you have? And I'd be like, well, I binge eat. Like, people don't think I do because I'm skinny, but it's really, really common with ADHD that people will be obese or whatever, but so especially at night, it's really common in the evening. Or sometimes I drink loads of alcohol, like every night or whatever. And she said, well, just don't have it in the house. I said, well, I've got a family and, they might want to have it in the house. Have chocolate or crisps or beer or a bottle of wine or whatever. And she said, okay, so you need to buy for your family a lockable cupboard. And just give them the key and you don't have it. I was like, oh. And I said, shouldn't I be like trying to learn how to not do that anymore? And she said, no, you can't. I was like, oh.
That's good to know.
You can't. And it's really true. Like, I like smoking cigarettes. I don't do it. But if I had cigarettes in the house right now, I'd just smoke them. But I'm not going to go to the shop and do it. It's an impulsive thing. Mm-hmm. So it's the fact that if they were there, I wouldn't be able to stop myself doing it. I would just be too impulsive to stop myself doing it. I would not be able to resist that impulse. But the distance between me and going to a shop to buy cigarettes is enough that I'm not gonna do it. It's kind of out of sight, out of mind kind of thing.
If you put your phone outside of your bedroom or whatever it is, and then you put it in a different room or whatever, there is that disconnect, that hurdle of. Or turning off your phone. I've done it so many times where you can just grab it and then you're impulsive,
Well, that's compulsive. So that's a compulsive behavior, is that you're doing it repeatedly. Yeah. So it is still an impulse, but it's like a repeated impulse that you're just doing something without even thinking about it. It's like, oh, I'm on my phone, and then I'm on it for hours. Yeah.
I get the binge eating thing and the drinking as well.
Yeah.
And it's smell of cigarettes. If there's a smell, it's like,
oh God! And this is just making me want a cigarette. I read the book. There's a really famous book. I don't know if it's really works, but I know people who swear by it. I can't remember what it's called, but it's this book about how to stop smoking. I feel like the writer is called Alan Carr, which I know is also like a famous British comedian. Yeah. But I think that's the name of the writer. So I bought this book to try and stop smoking, and he just describes smoking in this really visceral way, almost like Haruki Murakami, the Japanese novelist. He'll write about eating food and cooking food, and it's incredibly evocative, very detailed. And so it's this book about smoking, but and you have to smoke as you're reading this book. Like he tells you right now, light your cigarette, and then he describes exactly what it's doing to you physically, to your body, biologically. And it makes people like never want to smoke again.
Wow.
Okay. But I've read this book and just thought, oh, this is fascinating, like stuff about biology, but I'm really enjoying this cigarette. I never smoked so much in my life after I read that book. So I just like didn't normally smoke that much. I was more addicted than I had been before. And it just hadn't worked at all. I was just able to disconnect mentally between like what I was reading and just what I was doing, and just, yeah. And then also I just forgot about the book. Because, ADHD, just fucking forgot about it. I read that book. I can't remember any of it now.
Oh, man, that happens to me all the time. I go to my wife and go, oh, yeah, I've just watched or read something interesting. Like, she's like, oh, ask a question about it. I'm like, no, I can't. No,
yeah, I don't know.
No idea.
I don't know.
No idea. I just felt it. I felt it. I've got the emotional feeling.
Yeah, it washes over you. Yeah, so my advice is that, whatever it was that I said, just take responsibility. Take responsibility. Yeah.
And I suppose acceptance as well. I mean, that takes its time and things as well. I mean, I feel like I'm in an unofficial degree of, which I know you can. It's probably I'm AD. I've got ADHD going into hyper focus of ADHD into this and stuff as well of the education, and it's like an unofficial degree in this neurodivergent world, and it can be overwhelming. And I know I've read up lots of things, like read lots, process as much as you can and things as well. And kind of sometimes it can be.
Yeah, like I say, I haven't been doing that. I don't really do that. I'll pick up the odd bit of information, or I'll talk to people about it, and then maybe I'll pick up something new that rings true for me. But ADHD isn't a personality type. It's just like being short-sighted or long-sighted, or, it's biological. It's in your brain. So,
working out your own.
There are stereotypes, but I don't think there is a personality type for ADHD. There can be loads of different ways that people are and ways that the condition will present. And so I don't think, I think you can kind of just look at all the things that people talk about in relation to ADHD and the possible extra things and say, well, do I experience that or not? Like hypermobility is one of them. So I'm really, really, really bendy, This is really common with ADHD. It's hypermobility. It's really common. Or rejection-sensitive dysphoria is some kind of category of ADHD symptom. And I definitely fucking have that.
Definitely.
Oh my God.
RSD.
Like if somebody seems to not want to hang out with me, or if I just feel rejection, like viscerally, I'll get so sad and upset and feel so hurt. And I'm much better now, partly because I think probably the medication does affect that directly, but just mostly because I realize it's a thing. So when it starts to happen, I'm like, I'm probably overreacting here. And just having that awareness is it enables you to step outside it a little bit. So you still feel it, but it's like you realize it's not real. And you certainly don't blame the other person, because I would feel so bad towards people sometimes when I felt like they had rejected me in some way. I'd feel like, why have you done that? That's so evil. Why have you done that? And they haven't done anything, Yeah. So I certainly don't do that anymore. Again, it's the whole thing about taking responsibility for it. It's like, if that might still happen, I might still have that feeling, and I might react to it as well. So it's too late. But then I'll realize later, it's like, oh shit, yeah, what I reacted to at the time isn't what was actually probably really happening. So I'll then take responsibility for it, So it's the way that accepting it and realizing why it's happened enables you to fix the situation, either externally with somebody else or some problem in the world, or just internally. You're not going to beat yourself up about it. You're not going to fall out with other people about it, or try and find a way out of the solution of the problem that you've created. It's just like, okay, that happened. This is why. I can fix it or just move on, and then that's that, and draw a line under it. And it's that's really the healthiest thing for me. Yeah.
And I find, because I was diagnosed with dyslexia back at university 2005, and it doesn't feel, it felt big then, and then it just then seeped into me as I was like, oh right, well, yeah, it's just dyslexia, that's just me, and I think the ADHD and the autism is probably like these two separate characters who will eventually blend in, and I think that's where the acceptance and the responsibility, obviously the time is the healer, and the process and thing going through it.
Yeah, I think as you learn about these things, that will have an effect. But it's not like you're a problem that needs to be solved. That's not the case. It's just you are who you are. It's just you'll learn how to live being who you are, and everybody has to go through that process. Everybody does. It's just harder for people who are neurodivergent, mostly, because the world that we live in is not built for neurodivergent people. So it is harder. So there's the social structures and stuff. But this is quite modern, I think. I think back in the day, people with ADHD probably were a lot more accepted, or had roles within societies or communities which suited them a lot better. They were probably familial roles, probably generational, because it's a genetic condition. So maybe they might be the warriors of a community, or they might, but that doesn't mean that they're necessarily
That's like the hunter back in the cave.
I don't know about hunting. Certainly, I feel like I'm hyper aware.
Yeah.
So I do feel like I can spot stuff. Maybe I would be a good hunter. Who knows? But maybe there was something. Autism.
We probably forget.
The common thing that people say is, if it wasn't for autistic people, we'd still be living in caves.
Yeah.
And I kind of think there's a lot of truth in that. Like, who invented the wheel? An autistic person invented the wheel, without doubt. Who invented? Well, nobody invented fire, but who invented kind of, the controlling of fire? That was the ADHD people, no doubt, just burning shit, just going, oh shit, oh no, oh, lost a leg, but
I reckon that's a mix between autism and ADHD.
Guys, look, I've got a fire in one place. I've got a fire mostly in one place. I know, yeah, my leg looks bad, but trust me, I can cook now. We're going to cook food.
Do you reckon those people had autism and ADHD? Maybe it's just like the risk factor of...
It's just different people who probably had roles within society, which maybe like ADHD people didn't live as long as everybody else. And maybe autistic people, had different roles. But, You're right. I just think they would be... I think it's just they were probably community and societal roles which accommodated. Because otherwise we wouldn't exist. Evolutionarily, we wouldn't be here. These things would have been bred out of the human species, thousands, many, many, many thousands of years ago, if they weren't useful to the survival of communities and survival of the species. So,
I mean, it's like if you take the top 1%, and especially America and things, and people, they're Marmite, but you take your Elon Musks and your Richard Bransons, they're both neurodivergent, and they are constantly.
I don't know. Elon Musk, I would guess, is
Richard Branson's.
I don't know for sure.
Richard Branson's dyslexic. Elon Musk, I think. Well, I'm not gonna label him, but it's like there is.
I don't know. I thought you'd do something, but yeah, there's another side to it as well. There's another side to it, which I definitely, some people with ADHD, they can kind of embrace it, and we see this with generations past in a way that our generation and subsequent generations aren't really able to do, because society doesn't tolerate it. So, for example, you might have people from previous generations with ADHD who might be very, very successful, whether it's, say, for example, in business, because they might be really creative, but they might be a fucking nightmare to be around because they do not mitigate their social behavior. Because I have to mitigate my social behavior. If I spoke to everybody the way that I naturally want to speak to people, so when I'm interacting with my mum, we might argue, we might get upset, we might shout, or we constantly interrupt each other. But we don't, that's okay. That's how we interact, okay? Because that's how we've always been.
Mm.
So then, we understand that's the way that we interact, because she's super ADHD as well. But in generations past, especially with men, I think, maybe having that, being incredibly blunt, incredibly kind of abrasive and unbelievably impatient, and get things done. You don't tolerate people getting things wrong. You just kick them out and just trample over people. I'm not saying that's like ADHD people are assholes, but I'm saying that if you were to do that and just let yourself do that, then you might be really successful. And I think that is a part of it, I think that's a part of the way that ADHD has sustained generationally as an untreated condition. So you do find that some people who are really successful do have like these conditions, but maybe they either have treated those conditions or worked around them, or maybe they just don't give a shit, because what it can be like if you, I don't know if you've experienced that, but it can create social friction. But the thing is, if you go through your life not wanting to upset people, or not being able to, not having that power to do that, because you weren't, born into a rich family or whatever, then, yeah, you have to either, it could be very hard to live, or you have to treat it and figure out how to live with it in a different way.
Yeah.
So that's a big generalization, which might be bollocks, but it's kind of
it's a rabbit hole, isn't it?
You do read a lot of people who write about their ADHD who've been quite successful. They will say, I was a fucking nightmare. So I had ADHD, but I didn't know, and I was a fucking nightmare to be around, and my staff hated my guts. So now I'm not like that anymore. Because people who are still like that don't write that about themselves. Anyway.
All right. On that note.
Yeah, I should go.
Actually,
a long time. So
it's quite late. So, mate, John, thank you so much. When I was going to say this is like when John met John, same spoons, but that is like these little quotes I had in my head. I was like, okay, yeah. Anyway, thank you so much for taking out the time. It's going to be about a 2-hour podcast, but that's amazing. So much little golden nuggets in there, convoluted rabbit holes that we've gone down and things. And wonderful.
Okay,
well,
man.
I wish you all the best, man.
Please, I look forward to hearing the podcast. I won't listen to my own episode, but I'll listen to your others. And I look forward to hearing whatever you release next, because your music is great, as I'm sure I've told you before, but if I haven't, then I love your playing and your vocals and your writing. It's all awesome.
You too, man. And thank you so much. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Cheers, John. See ya.
Cheers, fella. Speak soon.